All right. Okay, well, welcome, and good to have you here for the Revelation class. So as we continue to move through, why don't we first have a word of prayer, and then we'll get started in our notes, okay? Let's pray. Lord, bless and be with us as we continue to study John's vision is brought to us in Revelation and what it means to us and the joy of being a class together and engaging in the kind of study, Lord, that brings us closer to understanding and closer to you and helps us, Lord, to delve into things that are so mysterious, sometimes seeming beyond comprehension. Through your Holy Spirit, help us to make sense of sometimes what seems unsensible in the sense, Lord, of being able to understand. Help us, Lord, to do so by the power of your Spirit and our own sharing together of our minds and our hearts. All this we pray, Lord, through your holy name, now and forevermore. Amen. Okay, well, let's pick up first. I want to reread. We're looking at the vision of God's creation, right? This vision. We had the inaugural vision, we had the 7 churches. Now we move into this vision of God's creation. That's what we've been looking at. And it is a vision, it does center on creation. It's a praise. And we're going to talk about some of the concepts that frame the framework of these visions. For example, hymnody. These are hymns. So we're going to talk about hymnody when we get to the end of the vision. We're going to take a little side break and talk about hymnody in Revelation and how it relates to Christian hymnody in the first century, in the time that John was writing. Because that helps us understand what we're reading. These are hymns that we're reading. They are hymns. And if the readers in John's time might have been singing along in their heads, just like we read lyrics, like we read the lyrics to Holy, Holy, Holy. Well, we're also at the same time putting the music to it in our minds as we read it. They were doing the same thing. These are hymns. And we're going to see these hymns from now on, throughout Revelation. Some of them are actually Jewish hymns, hymnody. They go back to the early apocalyptic time. But they have been adapted to Christianity. And that's what John does so well, because that's John's historical experience. So, let me pick up then, and I'll reread, and you can read along, just so we get caught up, because we've been away a little bit, to the heavenly worship, chapter 4. And what's interesting, I love the way this is neatly arranged. Chapter 4 is the hymn and the vision of God in creation. Chapter 5 is the hymn and the vision of Christ as the Redeemer. So here we see John creating or giving us 3 theological points that's going to undergird all of Christianity. God Creator, Christ Redeemer, Holy Spirit is what? Creator, Redeemer.
The Trinity, Holy Spirit.
But I'm saying, what is in the roles? If God is the Creator and Christ is the Redeemer, what is the Holy Spirit? Ends in an ER too.
Sustainer.
Sustainer, exactly. So here's John fleshing this out. So instead of us getting all caught up in the nomenclature and trying to pick apart these images and things, and it's good to study them to know where they come from, it's better to get the overall picture of what John's doing. And because these are foundational things. These are foundational things that we believe. And so much of our of post-first century Christianity comes from Revelation. Augustine, who's the foundational Christian theologian, wrote The City of God. The City of God is a vision from Revelation. All these concepts, that's why Revelation is so key. And we don't even really work a lot on it because we generally focus on the life of Christ and as disciples what that means. But Revelation shows us how our theology was formed, what we believe about Christ, what we believe about being a Christian, what we believe is the future, what's the present and what is the future. So and of course for Calvin, Revelation was everything, because Calvin said God is sovereign. Well, we see the sovereign God unrolling history unrolling the scroll by means of the Lamb, who's the only one able to do that. Christ's redemptive death. That's what it did. It ended history and created faith history. It ended human history and created faith history. These are all things we study in seminary. I mean, these are high theological concepts. So let me get back down to the heavenly worship here, and we'll pick up where we left off as best as we can. We're coming to the end of 4, then we're going to jump right into 5. After this I looked. Everybody with me? 4, chapter 4, Revelation 4. After this I looked, and there in heaven a door stood open. We talked about the door, the gate, right? Remember that. And the first voice, which I heard speaking to me like a trumpet, said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." Remember, we talked about the ecstasy, the vision, ecstasy, the being taken up, which is both a John's theme and an early Jewish apocalyptic theme. You either remained on the earth as he did in the first part, the first vision, or then you get taken up. There is a step. And the key to all these transitions is after this, or the words then. So when John uses after this, that's a shift. Or uses the word then I saw, that's a shift, okay? So it's important that we look for these shifts, because that is helping us to structure the whole of Revelation. After this I looked in heaven, a first voice, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." At once I was in the Spirit, and there in heaven stood a throne with one seated on the throne. Now we go into this really elaborate, difficult, descriptive passage. And one seated there looks like jasper and carnelian. We talked about that. And around the throne is a rainbow that looks like an emerald. Of course, the importance about that is not so much the colors or the emerald. It is the rainbow, which again, this is a hymn to creation, to God's creative power. Okay? So the rainbow is important there. Around the throne are 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones are 24 elders, dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads. We talked about the origin of that from the number 24, and maybe it would be, maybe some said the 12 tribes with the 12 apostles, da-da-da-da-da. Okay? So forth and so on. So we looked at that. Coming from the throne are flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder, and in front of the throne burn 7 flaming torches, which are the 7 spirits of God. And in front of the throne, there is something like a sea of glass, like crystal. And around the throne, and on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures full of eyes, in front and behind. Now, the reason that, if we realize what the theme of the vision is, it helps us not so much to understand exactly what the symbols mean, but what they relate to. These are all symbols of creation. This is all creation. In chapter 5, you're not going to see as much vivid color description. What you're going to see is, it's focusing on the Lamb, on the redeeming work of the Lamb. So its images are going to focus on that, okay? But in here, this is a hymn to creation. So all the images are going to reflect things in creation. Jewels, stones, colors, rainbows, okay? These are things out of creation. So the vision reflects that, which makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So let's pick up here. I think we left off around 5 or 6. Do y'all remember? I want to be clear. Did we do it around 5 or 6?
I don't remember us doing 5.
Okay, that's where we stopped. Okay, the theophany. Well, let's talk about theophany a little bit. I remember asking you, coming from the throne are flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder. So where have we seen in the Old Testament God's presence in the form of lightning and thunder? Where do we see that?
On the mountaintop with the
Mount Sinai. And I did ask that question. I remember that, on Mount Sinai, okay? So earthquakes and rumblings and thunder are always do you remember any other places in the Old Testament that we see the same kind of phenomenon? Elijah, great story of Elijah. And that wonderful story where God's going to meet him. He's in the cave hiding, right? He's in the cave. And God's going to meet him. And so the earthquake comes and he goes out to the cave and God's not in the earthquake, right? Remember that? Then the lightning and the thunder and the wind, great wind, goes out with each one, and God's not in any of them. And then he hears the still small voice. Yeah. Boy, to me, that is incredibly scary. I expect to see God in lightning and thunder, but a still small voice, no way. I'm going in the other direction. So that's scary. And so we see this. These are signs, and that's what I've got up here on the board. These are signs of theophany. In the Exodus passage, 5 signs of the presence of the living God are mentioned. Thunder, lightning, thick cloud, a loud trumpet, and earthquake. Now think in the New Testament where we see theophanies, where we see God's physical presence. Well, think about where you see that in the New Testament. Think of some of those passages where that happens.
Well, at the baptism, there's a voice that comes down.
Excellent, excellent. And where does the voice come from?
Cloud.
The cloud. So here's the cloud, right? So where else do we see the thick cloud?
At the ascension, or not the ascension, the transfiguration.
At the ascension and the transfiguration. Very good. Jesus, and usually when we think of thick cloud, we think of the thick cloud above, but usually the thick cloud surrounds the people. At the transfiguration, they were in the cloud. In the ascension, they were in the cloud, and that's when Jesus leaves them. So it's not like, usually the image is not like Jesus being lifted up, but he kind of fading away from them in the cloud. And then the cloud lifts and he's not there. Kind of like that idea, That's kind of the way you might envision it. Earthquake. Where do you see earthquake in the New Testament?
Crucifixion.
Crucifixion. Excellent. Earthquake. So all of these are repeated signs of God, the physical earth. And we're back to creation again. Remember? The physical earthly signs in creation of God's living presence. That's where all this comes from. Okay? That's where all this comes from. Thunder, lightning, so forth. There are 5 signs of God's presence. In the Greco-Roman culture, and this is what we kind of left out where it is, there's naked Zeus. Zeus was depicted as associated with lightning and thunder. So here is John writing in that culture, and he's showing God as greater than Zeus. That Zeus does not, God doesn't throw lightning bolts. Zeus does. God creates the lightning bolts. God is, you don't see really Zeus that much as creator in the Roman, in the myths, do you? You really don't see that. I told you, their myths are more like soap operas. They really are. They really are. Their myths are more like soap operas. But you don't really see much of a creative aspect to that. And so we see that. And then here's Domitian. And in the Emperor Domitian associated himself with both Zeus and Jupiter and lightning. So here again, Domitian, who was persecuting the church, the Christians, as some of the other emperors had, associated himself with this. And here again is John, relating the vision to the presence of God, to that which is greater than Domitian or Zeus, okay, the culture of that time. Because Domitian claimed himself to be a god. That's why he associated himself with thunder and lightning and so forth. And there are some reliefs, some paintings that show emperors with thunderbolts in their hands and things like that. Because they wanted to be worshipped as gods. Okay, then let's move on forward then. Also, we were called that the 7 spirits, by the way, that was being talked about here. Let's see, burning 7 flaming torches, you will recall that they are angelic beings from Revelation 1:4, such as the 7 archangels. But more than likely, rather than being the 7 archangels, it probably is the menorah, okay? The lampstand with the 7 lights, or 7 lampstands is what they call it. But it's probably the image of the menorah that burns in front of the throne of God. Then we come to verse 6, And in front of the throne, there was something like a sea of glass, like crystal. So we talked a little bit about that sea of glass, about what that would represent or what that could look like. So let me, here's an example from Ezekiel of an image that's like the sea of glass. Over the heads of the living creatures, there was something like a dome, shining like crystal, spread out above their heads. So this here is John describing a cosmology that generally had been believed, up until it was about this time that they started realizing the earth was round and not flat. So by the time of John, they put the earth as round, as a sphere, right? That's understood, but they put the earth at the center of the universe, and everything wheels around it. Okay? They hadn't moved out yet. So to understand that the sun is the center of the universe.
Now I've seen why they call the guy built the Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace, yeah.
It was a...
You mean the Crystal Cathedral?
Or Crystal Cathedral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Image from Revelation. Yeah. Sure. Robert Schuller. Who went to Princeton. I think they kicked him out, though. I think they really did. I'm not kidding about that. I think they did. So the sea of glass. Again, these are things that, we really can't. The only way we can understand is to say that in the Old Testament, God disclosed the divine presence through natural phenomena. And so if we come to this idea of, let me run past the lampstands. There we go. This is what I was looking for right here. Over the heads of living creatures, there was something like a dome, shining like crystal, spread out. So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord sits enthroned as king forever. That's from Psalms, from Exodus. And they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet there was something like a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. Like the very heaven for clearness. So these are images that are genuine, that come out of Judaic, the Hebrew scriptures that John is using here, that John sees, and they make sense. The Sea of Glass is based primarily upon Ezekiel 1:22. In Genesis 1, the primeval ocean is divided into two halves, that which is above and that which is below. And then we see Psalm 29:10 and that pavement of sapphire that we see in Exodus. So how do we interpret that particular symbol? Well, several ways. Decoration or temple furniture. It's a decorative idea. The heavenly equivalent of the Red Sea. The heavenly equivalent of the Red Sea. The cleansing blood of Christ. That's one way that the Sea of Glass has been interpreted. Just the image of divine providence that is clear. It's clearly seen. It is created by God and it's clearly seen. Also represents God's unfinished agenda. These are all the interpretations over the centuries that have been applied to this Sea of Glass. Or it represents persecution and martyrdom. It sounds like, how do they get that out of a sea of glass? Well, that's what they do. That's how you get PhDs and stuff. That's kind of how that image has been interpreted. Then we have these four living creatures. Let's talk a little bit about them because that's really interesting here. That is really an interesting symbol. And here are the four living creatures, okay? Each one, there's the face of a human, the face of a lion, the face of an ox or a bull, the face of an eagle, the head of an eagle, okay? So how do we understand the four living creatures? If you were to, let's go back to that a second. What do you think these four images symbolize, okay? This is just a guessing game for you. I mean, we're going to go through the different interpretations of it, but it's for me too. So what do you think the face would represent? The human face?
Mankind.
All right, we would start with the idea of humanity, create, right? Humanity. But what it was, name some of the characteristics, and I would say positive, of humanity.
Empathy, love.
What is our greatest asset as human beings compared to the rest of creation?
Mind.
Mind. Very good. Wisdom. Wisdom. That's what I mean. These are creative images. Remember, this is a hymn to creation. So what is it that makes humanity unique in creation? Okay. Now let's think about the eagle. What do you think? And we're not talking about the United States of America. Just to let you know. Besides the United States of America, what do you think the eagle would represent? What are some of the characteristics, the created characteristics of the eagle?
Well, it flies.
It flies. Good. Good. Keep going. Good.
It's probably one of the biggest birds.
It's a dominant bird. Correct. Correct.
Very swift.
Swift as eagles. There you go. Very good.
It's a predator.
You're nailing these things. Swift as eagles. Correct. Swiftness. Swiftness.
But it's a predator.
Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Correct. But it also flies, has a huge wingspan, flies very high and very fast.
Yeah.
Right? So that all those things that you just mentioned are correct. Now think of the great creative aspect of the ox.
Strong.
Strength. That's easy. It comes immediately to mind. What was the role of the ox in John's culture? Or in John's day?
What was it? It was the automobile.
It was more. It was the tractor. It was the tractor and the automobile and everything else. The ox moved mountains. The ox moved mountains. So the ox's strength. So you've got wisdom, swiftness, strength, and now finally you've got the lion. And we know what the lion represents, right? Has always represented in human culture. What does the lion stand for?
Ferocity.
Huh?
Ferocity.
Ferocity? What is the...
It's the king of the beasts.
King. Royalty. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that these things that we can immediately relate to, they did back then too, 2,000 years ago. So you've got royalty, kingship, you've got wisdom with humanity, you've got swiftness and the wingspan and the predator with the eagle, and then you've got strength with the ox. You have just nailed down exactly what these symbols basically mean. I mean, there's, it's simply what it means. The reason I use this image of the amphitheater is because the vision that we're seeing is kind of based around what the amphitheater looked like. You've got the center and then everything around it. Now, some Greek amphitheaters, Greek style, Hellenistic, had the stage in the center and was completely surrounded. Okay? This is one where that's not the case. It's kind of a, but this is the image they used, and it's clear from the verses that these creatures surround the throne as an inner circle, just like the Greek amphitheater. So here's kind of the inner circle right here. Okay, the throne would be here, the inner circle would be here. But the fact that it's four of them probably means four corners. If we look at creation, what fours do we see in creation?
Directions.
Good. North, south, east, and west. Excellent. What other fours do we see in creation? Very good. What other fours do we see? The four what?
Earth, wind, fire.
Very good. Very good. Earth, wind, fire. What is water?
Water.
Earth, wind, fire. Excellent. What other fours do we see in the measuring of time in creation?
Seasons.
Seasons. Exactly. So all these four creatures have all been associated with the creation, the fours in creation. Earth, wind, fire, water, the compass directions, and the four seasons, and any other fours in creation that you can think about. They've all been associated with that idea. And also, it's the fact that it would have been to some degree patterned on the ark. Let's go. Let me read this. It's a long passage, but it comes from Ezekiel 1:5-25, and so much of what the vision has is directly related to Ezekiel, as we know. So in the middle of it was this is Ezekiel's vision. In the middle of it was something like 4 living creatures. This was their appearance. They were of human form. Each had 4 faces. Each of them had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of a calf's foot. And they sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their 4 sides, they had human hands. And the 4 had their faces and their wings thus. The wings touched one another. Correct, a barrier, right? Each one of them moved straight ahead without turning as they moved. As for the appearance of their faces, the 4 had the face of a human being, the face of a lion on the right side, the face of an ox on the left side, and the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. The wings were spread out above. Each creature had 2 wings, each of which touched the wing of another, while 2 covered their bodies. Each moved straight ahead. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went, without turning as they went. In the middle of the living creatures, there was something that looked like burning coals of fire, like torches, there's the light, moving to and fro among the living creatures. The fire was bright, and lightning, theophany, issued from the fire. The living creatures darted to and fro, like a flash of lightning. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the earth beside the living creatures, one for each of the 4 of them. As the appearance of the wheels and their construction, their appearance was like a gleaming of beryl. The 4 had the same form, their construction being something like a wheel within a wheel. When they moved in any of the 4 directions without veering as they moved. Their rims were tall and awesome, for the rims of all 4 were full of eyes all around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels moved beside them, and when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went, and the wheels rose along with them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When they moved, the others moved. When they stopped, the others stopped. And when they rose from the earth, the wheels rose along with them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Over the heads of the living creatures, there was something like a dome, shining like crystals, spread out above their heads. Under the dome, their wings were stretched out straight, one toward another. And each of the creatures had 2 wings covering its body. When they moved, I heard the sound of their wings, like the sound of mighty waters, like the thunder of the Almighty, a sound of tumult, like the sound of an army. When they stopped, they let down their wings. And there came a voice from above the dome over their heads. When they stopped, they let down their wings. In Ezekiel, these creatures carry the throne of God. They carry the throne of God. And you have to remember that John, being an apocalyptist, obviously knew these images well, and in his vision he sees a Christianizing of this image, basically a Christianizing of the image in this hymn to God. But again, we see images of creation: the dome, the barrel, the colors, the fire. You see all these images of creation in there. So clearly, we see where this comes from. And so any thoughts about that? Anything that strikes you about that? Anything that strikes you about that? I'm going to jump back on that. There we go. Okay, the living creatures bear up. Yeah, go ahead.
The eagle is the one that to me, it seems like the weakest explanation in terms of swiftness. I've never thought of an eagle as particularly swift.
I know. Yeah.
But I think of it as it's the emblem for our country. I think it's the emblem of the Episcopal Church, because it's at Great St. Paul's. There's an eagle up in front.
In John's day, what was it the emblem of?
Rome. So I view it more as the ruler of the sky, kind of, and the lion would be the ruler of the earth. Good,
very good. There again, a creative, associating those images with creation. That's excellent, because that's what's going on here. That's exactly what's going on. And it is interpretive, obviously, but it makes sense. It makes sense. What I'm saying is, when we're interpreting these symbols, there's no right or wrong. There's different aspects of it that are presented. And then it's like, well, we're not going to know which particular aspect is intended. But that's an excellent point to make. You've got, the eagle maybe is the ruler of the air or the sky. Also clearly an association with Rome. The eagle was the symbol of the emperor. It was the emblem of Rome. So here we see the eagle in a sub-position to God, right? And I know that's intentional. There's no question about that. We see again, John's vision always relates to something in his culture, the situation at his time. And remember, we can never lose focus that Revelation was written for persecuted Christians who were being persecuted by whom? That's why these images matter to them. By Rome. And Domitian was worshipped as a god. So here, John, the vision, is going to make every effort to communicate to the persecuted Christians that God is greater. Don't worry. God is greater than the eagle. God is greater. That there is above and beyond the earth. There is more. So that's important. There are also cherubim. We've seen the cherubim. They were covered with eyes, and that is from Ezekiel 1:18. What do the eyes represent? Well, there's different. They represent different symbols. If you think about a creature covered with eyes, what do you think about?
They see everything.
They see, good. They see everything.
Omniscient, yeah.
They're omniscient. Very good. They see everything. They are the eyes of God. We think of God as being omnipresent and omniscient, okay? Now, also in John's time, the eyes could be a metaphor for stars. So, yes, they called stars the eyes of heaven. Yep. So, multiple stars. When you're looking at the eyes of the creature, you're looking at stars. Yeah, they had astronomers and astrologers. But the stars were more than just, burning lights. They were organic. They communicated, like through astrology. They communicated things, and they were eyes that watched the universe. So Earth was surrounded by eyes that were watching. Okay, the living creatures are an exalted order of heavenly beings. They are an order. We've seen the 24 elders, right? We've seen the cherubim and seraphim. They are an order. In other words, they are in themselves a group, an organization, an exalted order of heavenly beings, and they can also represent the entirety of life in creation. The eyes could be. They represent all of life. Every star, every eye represents one aspect of life. Because life is infinite. I mean, the number of beings if we're talking about not just humans, we're talking about all beings on Earth, are from bugs to germs to whatever, bacteria, are infinite. And so the stars could represent just the infinite quality of creation. You can imagine we've come a little further than that. When we look at creation from a scientific point of view, it comes, I'm not saying it isn't still as astonishing and mysterious and amazing. Maybe even more so the deeper we look. But at the same time, imagine what creation looked like to them, who did not have that scientific, how they interpreted all this, how they interpreted life in all of its forms, what the meaning of it, and what were the stars, and again, they observed all these things. What did they mean? The question would be, what did they mean? So, any thoughts about these images, or any thoughts about that before we move on to verse 7? Okay, someone read verse 7 for me. 4:7. Now we're going to kind of pick apart these four creatures.
I'll read it.
Okay.
The first living creature like a lion, the second living creature like an ox,
the third living creature with the face of a man, and the fourth living creature like a flying eagle.
Okay, and again we go to Ezekiel 1, 5 through 14. Each four had a different face. Each face looks in a different direction. Each face looks in a different direction, right? Here there are 4 cherubim, and 3 being of the full likeness, and only one, interesting, 3 are the full likeness of the creature. Only one is of the face. Which one? Huh? The human. Very good. The human. The human, only the face of the human is, we don't see the rest of the creature or description. The others are a full likeness of an ox, an eagle, and a lion. Okay? One interpretation involves the 4 quarters of the zodiac and their corresponding seasons. Human equals fall, lion equals winter, ox equals spring, and eagle equals summer. Now that was an astrological interpretation back in the time of John, in the culture of Asia Minor and of the culture of that time. So that's one interpretation. There's been other interpretations from the Christian point of view. Irenaeus, the early Christian father, what we call, the early Christian leaders, identifies the 4 evangelists with the 4 living creatures of the verse. John, the lion; Luke, the ox; Matthew, the face; and Mark, the eagle. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason why those are the case. I don't think Irenaeus explains it at all. The early Christian fathers said that Christianity had already begun associating the gospel writers with symbols. So here's an explanation. This is the symbols. He says each of these have a symbol. He said all 12 were related to a symbol. And as we start looking at the earliest Christian art that we can find, generally the 2nd and 3rd century, we do see these images associated with the gospel writers. But I think they were more somewhat of a later creation, or a later understanding, rather than concurrent necessarily with the time of John. I mean, just about every scholar will say that this relates directly to Ezekiel. And this is just John putting this passage from Ezekiel into a Christian context. That's what he's doing. And that makes perfect sense. So that makes sense to me. Also, there was always an argument about, well, maybe if we're going to talk about these images as the gospel writers, John, Luke, Matthew, and Mark, when we order the gospels, what order do we put them in? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But it may have been that John, Luke, Matthew, and Mark was the original order of the Gospels. Yep. In the first codex, this is a codex. There were several forms of the Gospels. Papyri, which were the most ancient forms. The early papyri. And the papyri were in scrolls, correct? They were in scrolls, okay, rolled up together. But then the codex emerged, and it is believed that in the first codex of the gathering of the Gospels, this was their order. This was their order. This is an early codex. I'm not sure if it's a. I'm not sure if does that look like Greek to me?
It's an Aramaic.
I don't know. I don't know what that is. It's not Greek. I can tell you it ain't Greek.
It almost looks like hieroglyphics of the Egyptian.
No, actually it is Greek. Because there's psi,
Okay.
and there's K, and there's rho. It is Greek. It is Greek. And there's upsilon. So it is Greek. It's just it's a different. It's like writing it a different way, but it is Greek. So, but then maybe it's Codex of the Scroll of the Gospels. I don't know. But anyway, the Codex was a book. The first books ever made were codexes. That's what they were called. And so codex that when we're interpreting biblical, if you look at a Greek a Greek Bible, New Testament, Greek New Testament, down at the bottom there are symbols for papyri, for scrolls, and for codexes. And when you have a passage let's say you've got two passages. One comes from a papyrus and one comes from a codex. Which one are you going to probably say is the correct interpretation?
Papyri.
Exactly, the papyri, because that would be earlier said.
Were the codexes found in jars like the...
Those were papyri.
Right.
The codexes were books.
Where did the codexes, where were they found?
Libraries. They had libraries, yeah. And they were libraries in early gathering churches.
But I thought that one of the reasons why they found the papyri in the jars was because when the Romans were coming in,
yes,
they were destroying everything.
Yes, that's correct.
They wanted to save.
Yes.
Did the codexes somehow survive?
And I'll have to look that one up. We know what they did. The papyri that they found, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were Hebrew. They, like you said, in the midst of a catastrophe, they were put there to be preserved and to save them from being destroyed. The church only did that in the monastic period. They gathered all their writings during the time much later in the monastic period. That's why monasteries were developed in the first place, to preserve against the infidels that were invading in the late, when the Roman Empire was falling. They gathered all the materials and put them in a safe place, and that's where the monasteries were formed, to keep them safe, to save Christianity from disappearing off the face of it. But now, I can't give you, I'm ashamed of this, I should know more about the history of the Codex. I know it's a much later development. Well, I say much later, 2nd century, around 2nd century. I'd have to look up when the earliest codex was. But whenever we do biblical interpretation, if we see a passage that comes from a papyrus rather than from a codex, and it's different, we tend to go with that interpretation because biblical interpretation is always the same. The closer you can get back to the original writing, the more accurate it is believed to be.
Are the codexes looked at as like a Rosetta Stone?
Yeah.
To explain?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in the sense of differently from a Rosetta Stone, in that Greek was obviously well understood. I mean, ancient Greek was well understood.
Help understand what was written.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But the codexes were simply the next development in publishing. They were like the word processor of their time. The papyri, suddenly you could write front and back and turn pages, which was a lot better than unrolling scrolls, a lot better.
Especially when they were copied.
Do you remember the first time you ever used a word processor?
Yes.
And for those of you who are younger that may be watching, we're aging ourselves here. And remember how incredible that was?
I wrote my dissertation on WordPerfect 5.
WordPerfect, yeah. Yeah.
Perfect 5.
Yeah. I mean, but how different it was to do that. I mean, to go, wow, this is great. This is amazing. This is so much easier than writing by hand or typewriting, or using a typewriter. So this is the Codex was an incredible move forward in regards to being able. And see, the problem with scrolls. Papyruses and scrolls was you were very limited in how much you could write. You could only hold so much, Scrolls could only be so thick. There was a limited amount you could put on. In fact, when we go to chapter 5 and we see the scroll of destiny, it is written on the front and the back side. We'll be talking about that, the front and the back side, which shows, but we're not going to get there yet, but you'll find out about that when we get there. We got enough to deal with as it is. Anyway, so there's the Codex. It can also be, we've already talked about the attributes of each creature. The strength of the lion, Psalms 104:21, the young lions roar for their prey, seeking their food from God. Strength of the lion. Lion is such an important symbol. The Lion of Judah. The Lion of Judah. The Messiah was associated with the lion. Christ was called the Lion of Judah. Okay?
My Bible here says in Matthew, he appears as the Lion of the tribe of Judah.
Yes.
In Mark, as the servant who became the sacrifice for sin. The calf was a sacrificial animal.
Good.
Hebrews 9:12. Luke's emphasis is on the Son of Man, and a flying eagle links him with heaven, as does John's Gospel.
In John's Gospel, yeah. I'm trying to think of where that is in John's Gospel that the eagle associated. I have to look that one up because I can't remember that. The service of the ox, and there's Hebrews, are not all angel spirits in the divine service sent to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation. So the ox does a service, okay? The service of the ox, but Einstein, the intelligence of humanity. Just so I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who is smart enough to repent. I added that passage in there, those words in there. The intelligence of humanity and the swiftness. There we go, the swiftness of the eagle. That's from Daniel 9:21. While I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen before in a vision, came to me in swift flight at the time of the evening sacrifice. And one of the signs of Gabriel was the eagle. That symbol was associated with Gabriel. So there is the swiftness. But again, just because that's there doesn't mean there's not other ways to see this. These are all very interpretive, okay? And then we talked about, again, the many eyes, the wings of the cherubim, and many eyes. Eyes could represent the watchers, the category of angels that were called the watchers. And that's kind of a creepy thing to think about. But angels watched everything going on and reported it to God. The angels were the watchers. How do we think about angels? How do we conceive of angels? Huh?
Your guardian.
Guardians? Very good. Guardians. What else roles do they serve? Messengers. But then they served as watchers. They were always watching, right? And telling God what was going on. Although God would know what was going on, so I'm not sure where that comes from. Okay, so any questions about that? And then here's some Old Testament or Hebrew scriptures, images. He rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly upon the wings of the wind. Then the glory of the Lord went out from the threshold of the house and stopped above the cherubim. The cherubim lifted up their wings and rose up from the earth in my sight as they went out with the wheels beside them. They stopped at the entrance of the east gate of the house of the Lord, and the glory of God of Israel was around them. So there are the wings, the understanding of where did the wings come from. In Ezekiel 10, the cherubim spread their wings to carry the chariot throne of God. So the wings, I was interested by the fact that the wings were in Ezekiel were joined together, right? That was interesting, wasn't it? Creating a wall around the heavenly throne. A wall. A barrier, if you would. Which might be emulating what in Judaism?
The wall around Jerusalem.
And keep going. And what else?
The temple.
The temple. Yeah. 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 Cherubim were on the ark, right? And the ark was located in the Holy of Holies, right? So these are images of that. Okay, and it's, sorry, didn't mean to drop my glasses there. Now, let's go on to the end of 8. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around inside. Day and night, without ceasing, they sing, verse 8, Holy, 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 the Lord God the Almighty, who was and is to come. So the idea we talked about of continuous adoration. Continuous adoration. And this is a quote from the hymn, Holy, 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 hymn number 1. Holy, 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 all the saints adore thee, casting down their golden crowns around the glassy sea. Cherubim and seraphim falling down before thee, which wert and art and evermore shall be. And then in Isaiah 6:1-2, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphs were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, because you can't have your face exposed to God. And with two they covered their feet, and with two they flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. This is a hymn to creation. That's what the praise is. It's a hymn to the creation. And it's a very common feature of apocalyptic descriptions of heaven. The holy, holy, holy has an actual name. It's called the Trisagion. Trisagion. Greek comes from the Greek. Trisagion simply means holy, holy, holy. But it's an important theological theme because it is like the foundation of all hymns. The holy, holy, holy. And especially in Revelation or in any apocalyptic writing, that holy, 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 the Trisagion, is associated with God. Praise is of attributes of God that are central to the apocalypse. Holiness, power, and eternity. Holiness, holy for the power, holy for the holiness, holy for eternity. So there's that kind of that tripart characteristics, attributes of God that are being praised. The word Almighty is used only of God, in both the Greek and the Hebrew. No other human beings were ever so called Almighty, were given the title Almighty, ever. Almighty was always associated with, I mean, how often do we use the word Almighty, even in English? When we're swearing. When we're singing Holy, Holy, Holy. When we're talking about God Almighty. But Almighty is not a word we use in common usage, is it? It's a rare word. We don't use it. I mean, it's a rare word, but we rarely use it. Except in swearing and associating it with God. I'm trying to think of a common usage for Almighty. There's not even a product named Almighty, is there?
It is occasionally used as an adjective to, that's almighty nice of you or whatever.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's very archaic usage.
It's very archaic, yeah. I was thinking, I just can't think of... Well, it's just rare. I can't think of a current context for English of that. And then we see the who was and is to come. Obviously a representation of God's eternity, who was, and this goes right back to Moses, I am who I am. Thus you shall say to the Israelites when they ask, what is your name? I am has sent me to you. He was and is to come. And the reason this tripartite description is extremely important is because in Revelation, John uses it in different circumstances and uses different parts of it. So when he says, we praise the God who was and is, he's talking about something that hasn't happened yet. It's going to. But was and is has happened and is currently happening. Or he may say, who is and is to come, and what's past is past. We're not thinking about that. So he'll use the tripartite in different ways in the context of what he's describing, in particular historical context. But it's always, when the three are used together, it's always a symbol of eternity, who was and is to come. God is above and beyond time. And like I said, the reference is that one right there, Exodus 3:14. And one point that my commentary makes, that all of this that we've just read, 6, 7, and 8, and the hymn of praise, could have been part of a hymn chanted in the temple liturgy. A hymn chanted in the temple liturgy. So this again goes back to hymnody. Tertullian, one of the early church fathers, was the first Christian author to include the Trisagion, the holy, 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 as a part of Christian liturgy. The liturgy. Now, just because he wrote it doesn't mean it wasn't a common use. But he's the one that wrote it first as a part of the liturgy. Clearly, he didn't make it up. Clearly, that, much of the early liturgy was not written down. It was sung and passed on. And it wasn't until later that the church started writing all their liturgy down. So, but Tertullian was the first to do that. That's pretty late. But I think they were singing that as part of the Christian liturgy from the very beginning, probably. We're going to talk about the hymnody in a minute. Now we come to verse 9. And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to the one who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever, then 10, the 24 elders fall before the one who is seated on the throne and worship the one who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before their throne, singing, "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory, honor, and power." There's glory, honor, and power. There's the three, holy, holy, holy. "For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created." Which is kind of an odd phrase. We're going to talk about that as we conclude chapter 4. Okay, so verse 9 is basically a hymnic summary. Sorry about that. A hymnic summary, and it's a doxology. We sing the doxology, right? Praise God from whom all blessings. We sing. We kind of modernize the language, but we sing the doxology. Praise God from whom all blessings grow, go. What are they? Flow. There you go. Praise God from creatures. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Ascribing of an attribute to a divinity, which the doxology does. Specific attributes listed, usually featuring glory, doxa. A formula describing the eternal quality of these attributes. So this is basically a doxology, and all doxologies have those elements to them. The ascription of glory and honor to God can be based on the common use of, in John's time, benefactor language in the Greco-Roman world. In response to someone like the emperor giving you a gift or supporting you, you would reply with a doxology to the emperor. Yeah, the benefactor. So here again is John using something from the contemporary culture of his time in opposition to Rome. God is the benefactor for what? Remember what this hymn is about? What is this whole chapter about? Creation. So we benefit by being created and being in creation. So that's what the hymn is to. The emperor doesn't create anything. So this is true. This is a thanksgiving to God for the gift that no one else can give, which is creation, okay, which is life. And so in verse 10, we see the 24 elders respond with worship. They respond to what the creatures say. Ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory of his name. Worship, bow down to. Bow down is the same word in the Hebrew as worship. Same word. Worship the Lord in holy splendor. And that comes from Psalm 29, 1 through 2. But what's important here is that bowing down is the same as worshiping. The two words. So when we talk about worshiping, we are using the same image of bowing down. Maybe we don't physically bow down, but that is what worship means. It means we bow our heads, right? We are worshiping. It's bowing down. This is the first occurrence of the pairing of the phrases to fall down and to worship in Revelation. We'll see that, but it's very common in the Old Testament and the New Testament. We see it in Psalm 72, in Daniel 3:5, in Matthew 2:11, in Acts 10:25, in 1 Corinthians 14:25. Bowing down is always associated with worship. Always. Very common. But in Revelation, this is where we first see it. Okay? And it represents subordination and homage. It parallels to the conquered rulers presenting their crown to the conqueror. And this is not a good image. It's the best I could get of it. It didn't pixelate very well. But you'll see the conquered leader presenting the crown to the conqueror. And so that's kind of the image that's being used by John here. They're casting down their crowns, the elders, before God. They're giving up their power. They're surrendering everything to God because God is greater. And why is God greater? Because God created. That is the great attribute of God, that no other leader, no other ruler, no other nation, no other figure has, and that is creation.
Does that mean they were doing the wrong thing by wearing these crowns?
No. The crowns represented their status. You know, in Revelation, it presents kind of a heavenly hierarchy. Remember we talked about the four creatures being their own little order? There are different orders in heaven. There's the order of the angels. The archangels are the greater angels than the lower angels. Then there are the elders with the crowns. The crowns represent their status, but when they worship, they cast the crowns off. Because in worshiping, you are giving everything over to God. It's an image of humbling oneself. It's an image of acknowledging that something is greater than you are.
Casting down your crowns has this image of, oh, you know, maybe we were disrespectful by, you know, assuming we had this high status. And so
Yeah.
here, you know, we're sorry about it here.
And it could be, but I think it's really there's nothing in the revelation image of heaven, at least in this vision, this particular vision. There's no indication that the 24 elders, in wearing their crowns, have done anything wrong. It's a sign of, think of it not crowns as royalty, but just as simply a sign of who they are. Like a name tag. Think of it that way. A name tag. It isn't, the crowns don't represent anything negative. In fact, it's all positive in the sense that one gives up their identity to God. That no matter how great one is, that it also is a sign that God has conquered everything and everyone.
That's what I get from that image, is that at that time, if you conquered another nation, the king would
Yes.
offer up his crown to you. It's not that he was wrong to wear it.
No.
It's just acknowledging your superiority and your sovereignty.
Thank you. It's an acknowledgement of sovereignty.
Yeah.
Exactly. Who is greater than the king? God, who has created all things. I wouldn't get hung up on the conquering part, except in opposition to the emperor, who at that time had conquered everyone and everything. Right? The emperor didn't even wear a crown. The Roman emperors did not wear a crown. Now, the Holy Roman emperors did later, but the Roman emperors did not wear a crown. They had other symbols. They had the eagle, they had the mace, they had the scroll. And we'll see these images in the next vision, at least the scroll. But they wore the wreath. They wore the wreath, which they called a crown. And at certain festivals, they may wear a golden wreath in a march. Or, after a conquering, they would wear a golden wreath, okay? So, but they didn't wear it all the time, you know. The regent or the emperor didn't always wear a crown. They just wore wreaths mainly, sometimes, and not always. So that was their tradition. So I think it's, like I said, I don't think it's I think it's an image of showing obeisance and honor. It's reverence. It's reverence. Yeah.
You're homage. You're giving your life.
And I think again it comes back to giving up your identity. Giving up your identity. And if you're going to say that God is all holy and powerful and eternal, that puts everything else in creation in a different aspect. Okay? It does. It changes everything. So that here's the emperor being claimed as being all holy and powerful and eternal, which is a joke, because the emperor can get overthrown and killed any time. So John is making a point to, now what's the point of John using this image? To say to the persecuted Christians, don't worry about it. God is greater. God is greater. God, the emperor can kill you on earth, but God is in heaven.
Well, I think that's important because to be really honest about this, God comes across to us as being very narcissistic.
Okay.
He wants people to say glory, glory, glory,
Yeah.
down, down,
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
And this narcissism is a new word for many of us. We haven't, we recognize when we see it. But that to this audience, to the audience where this is being written, is a totally different situation.
Very good.
Where they didn't have any power and they were really pleased that
Excellent.
God did.
Excellent. That's an excellent point. That contextualizes what John, the vision, is doing here. And we can't understand Revelation without the context of it. Again, it comes back to, if you, even today, 2,000 years later, if you live in a persecuted situation, these images have meaning to you. If you are being forced to bow down, or you are being killed for not believing or not obeying a leader, or these kind of things, which still happen, these images are powerful. You've got to get that. You're right. It does come across as narcissism. Although it's always put into the context of thanksgiving. That, in other words, it's voluntary. Narcissism is forced, I think. Narcissism is where you have to do it. But all of these things, these worships, they kind of have a spontaneity to them. And they are worshiping in thanksgiving. The worship comes from the creatures. Never once does God demand to be worshipped. Nowhere do you see where God says, worship me. You don't see that. You hear others say, worship God. But you don't hear God say, worship me. In fact, and let's go back to Christ. Christ never demands the disciples to worship him. But when they do, it's spontaneous. When he returns from the resurrection and appears to them, they worship him. And that's all it says is they worship him. It doesn't say he stood there and said, now start worshiping me. It is spontaneous. It is a spontaneous reaction. So I mean, is that door locked? Let Dale, hang on, let's let him in. He can't see. Thank you.
It just sticks.
Yeah, come on in, Dale. Come on in. So, that's the question. Do we worship because we have to? Now, my parents would drag me to church, when I was a kid, Sometimes I didn't want to go. I usually enjoyed it, so I didn't. I dragged me. So that was forced worship from my parents, not from God. Not from God. I mean, why do we worship?
Do you think some of that, after the crucifixion and Christ rising from the tomb, there was fear? Too, because they had denied him, they had done nothing to stop what Judah did. And then he arrived, he raises up, and yet now they're fearful. They realize just that point right there makes them see all this talk about being strong. Oh my God, he is strong.
I think there's always an element of fear in worship. Always.
Yeah.
Should we not fear God?
That's really true.
There's always an element of fear in worship. But fear, the word fear, translated into Hebrew, means, as we know, respect, honor. So the fear of the Lord means the respect and honor of the Lord. In other words, if the vision says anything to us, it is that we have nothing to fear. Nothing to fear. God's there. He was, he is, he always will be. He is the creator. He is over all things. That's good news, according to John, the vision. That's great. That's the best news. Here on earth, we have nothing to fear. Most importantly, we don't have to fear death. So out of just joy, I mean, imagine at that time that, I mean, how does your perspective change about everything if you see the risen Christ? Nothing matters anymore.
That's right.
Nothing matters. So what? I was talking about that movie, which I've enjoyed. It's not 100% accurate, but it's pretty good. Risen. The reason is, if you got my Wednesday warm-up, I talked a little bit about that, okay? And what I love about Risen is, again, knowing it's not historically very accurate, but theologically it's pretty good. And so, in the story, the tribune who supervised the crucifixion has been tasked by Pilate. We have no evidence this happened at all. Tasked by Pilate to, get the body back. Get the body back. Because, And so the tribune is frantically searching for the body. And he finally finds a few disciples and brings them in to do the usual Roman style of interrogation, which is torture to death. And I think the one that represents Philip, I believe, they bring in. And he goes, so what? So what? Go ahead, torture me to death. It's okay. I've seen the risen Christ. Everything's changed now. I'm not afraid of death anymore. Everything's changed. So go on, do your worst. And the tribune does it because he's not going to get what he wants. So what I'm saying is, I think it's a good depiction of how things would change if you did see standing in front of you the risen Christ. We operate by faith, but they saw Christ. Now, also, it's interesting that we're at the end of 4, so that'd be a good place to stop. It's interesting that I think it's Matthew. I think it's Matthew. Yeah, Matthew. Could be Luke. That when they go to the ascension, it says that some doubted. Remember? And Luke, I think Luke doesn't tell us what they were doubting. It makes sense though. You're sitting there going, this can't be. This is a trick. And these were disciples struggling with what they were seeing. This can't be. This is impossible. So I love the honesty of that writing. I love the honesty of that writing.
It was easier to say they didn't recognize him.
Yes.
Because logic would say...
Logic would not allow you to recognize that.
Would not allow you to recognize it.
Exactly. It would actually block you from recognizing it. Because logically, you would be coming up with everything possible to not believe that. Because it's beyond conception. Right? It's beyond conception. But the change it represents is why when we talk about worship, we talk about, again, we worship God for what was, what is, and what is to come, right? Was creation, is redemption, what is to come is salvation, right? We live in the age of the Spirit. We live in the age of what is to come. Right? That's why we worship. That's why we do the unusual things that Christians do as compared to just good people. Right? Right? We do different things. Hopefully we do what good people do too, not always. But the things we do are to go beyond good and bad and to go to God. To go to God. I always like to say this. We will never be able to judge rightly or wrongly. But we know that God always does. So what do we get from God? Truth. And that's something we have a hard time getting on earth. Truth. Because we can never really, I'm getting to more philosophical stuff, but we can never really see things as they are. We can see things, but we can't really see them as they are, truly are, but what we perceive them to be. And we get hung up in our perceptions all the time, don't we? We get hung up in perceptions all the time. We saw the universe in one way for centuries. Suddenly, we see it now in another way. But even that way may not be the final way, right? Science opens us up to new perceptions, and then we have to interpret those perceptions, don't we? And our interpretations may be wrong. They may be wrong. Yeah.
I just thinking of the illustration of a hurricane, because we never had the sophistication of satellites that can view it in terms of its period of entry, and then to know that there is an end to it.
It's cycled, yeah. Yeah.
But even in the area of art, I know that there's artists that can create illusions to fool the eye. They've done it in the cathedrals in Europe.
Perfect.
You have to touch it to be convinced it's two-dimensional. Otherwise, it appears three-dimensional.
I don't know if y'all knew, but Dale's a great artist. He's really good. His Christian art is amazing. It really is. It really is.
But just again, you can't trust your empirical senses.
No. And what's amazing is, we talk about like a satellite, for example. Anything that we get what we call a God's eye view of something, which opens us up to a greater reality. So our perceptions are constantly changing. And here we're trying to perceive what John is seeing, which is a huge leap ahead of anything. I mean, beyond anything we can imagine. Talk about a leap. We haven't even gotten much beyond the solar system yet, although we're seeing a lot more. To go now into the metaphysical, I don't know. But anyway, it's interesting. Okay, so we're done. I think we're done with the chapter. Let me finish up here. Make sure I am finished with it. Okay, the 4-line hymn. We'll close with this. Verse 11. The 4-line hymn to God in the conclusion. The 3 emphases are worthy, followed by 2 divine names, 3 substantives after to receive, glory, honor, and power, and then 3 creation sayings. 3 creation sayings. Worthy is ascribed to God in Christ is not used before this verse in the Bible. Never used. Isn't that interesting? This is the first time worthy is used. That idea of worthy is used. Our Lord and God, during 1st century, 2 living emperors claimed to be gods. We know that, Gaius and Domitian. And it was considered to be very tacky for an emperor to claim to be a god, even among their subjects. Yeah. And only 2 did it. Now, others might declare them God after their death, but none of them declared to be living gods except for Domitian, who was persecuting the Christians, and Gaius. Those were the only 2 that ever declared themselves and expected to be worshipped as living gods, which was to much of Roman culture a blasphemy. It was a blasphemy, okay? Domitian had letters sent out in the name of our Lord and God. Now, the idea of the emperor as God, as Rome fell, became more common in the 2nd, 3rd centuries as time rolled on. It became more common. But in the time of John, only 2 had declared themselves to be living gods. And finally, because you created everything and by your will they existed. Yes, were created. Now that funny phrase at the very end, that's called an inversion, which is a style of writing that we see in Revelation. It's called an inversion of events, which sometimes occur in Revelation. Notice how it seems out of order. You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory, honor, and power, for you created all things, past, and by your will they existed, past, and were created. So it jumps back again. So it's kind of like, well, what? That's just like a literary funny thing. A literary funny thing in the Greek. Creation was an important theme in Hellenistic Judaism, extremely important in application to God and in early worship. So that ends our study of that, of the vision of 4. So now we have a picture of God in the vision as creator. We know the context. Now we move to a whole different vision, right? From creator, now we move to redeemer, Christ. Okay, who believe, and this is where John throws us. Now we expect to see the concurrent image of Jesus as the conqueror, the king, the ruler, whatever you want to call it, and those titles are actually given to him. But the form he appears in is as a slaughtered lamb. And there is the great Christian contradiction. How is victory achieved? How is conquering done? How? Through what?
Through sacrifice.
Through sacrifice. Through self-giving. That is the heart of Christianity. That the power, that real power, the power of God, is vested in surrender, not in overcoming. Not in, in giving up. See, that's a huge way of rethinking everything. That's what made Christianity very unique. That was the first religion that had ever conceived that, human beings made sacrifices to other gods, but it was usually to get the gods to do something for them. This is saying that sacrifice is the very nature of God. No God had ever been conceived as one who sacrificed.
It's counterintuitive.
For the sake of humanity, huh?
It's counterintuitive.
It's counterintuitive.
Our culture.
Counterintuitive. Which makes not only Christianity unique, but it also helps its authenticity, at least in my mind. It helps it confirms what it's saying, and I like to think it confirms what happened. But that's faith. So we all wish we had proof. So, all right, let's have a word of prayer and then we'll be done. Lord, bless and be with us as we move now to chapter 5, to the next vision. We thank you, Lord, for what we've learned. Help us to think about it as we go forward. Thank you. Give us a wonderful week together, Lord. Be with us this weekend as we celebrate Bill's retirement. Be with he and Jerry. And thank you for all good gifts. In your holy name we pray. Amen.